Awesome. Before we get started, Tsering, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, that's correct. Perfect.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
How are you doing? How's your week been so far?
Week has been good. Week has been really good. We had a bit of a crazy week the week before in terms of growth, which was kind of unexpected and amazing. And this week's
Yeah,
been a little bit slower in comparison, but still a good week. But yeah, we're just like really busy working on Macaw. So things are good. It's exciting.
that's amazing. Since this is called Blunders and Breakthroughs, is there a blunder and is there a breakthrough that you would like to share from your current week, past week, whenever, in the recent past?
I guess a recent blunder was when I got sick. I got some people that maybe follow me saw that I got sick last week. I had a pretty bad case of food poisoning, and I tried to stick to posting. I sort of committed to posting on Twitter at least once a day, and I noticed like I still posted, but it was kind of crap. Honestly, I was just like, all right, I need to push something out,
Hmm.
and I think the algorithm kind of didn't like that my quality had dropped. And so I noticed quite a bit of a steep drop off there, and it's building back now, which is great. So that's probably a little bit of a blunder is like, I don't know how I could have prepared for that maybe, but anyway, a little bit of a blunder was just the algorithm drop. And then a bit of a breakthrough. I don't know. I think, like I said last week, also while I was sick, just a lot of the stuff that we put in over the last couple of months since we launched kind of all coalesced to kind of be just like a crazy week for us in terms of growth. A lot of just different things going on basically at the same time kind of became this huge surge of traffic and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a great last week.
That's awesome. Well, I hope you're feeling better, firstly, from the food poisoning.
Appreciate it.
And secondly, I always want to understand the euphoria someone experiences when, you know, three or four things just collide that you've been working on, and just the magic there happens, and you see a sudden spike. How does that feel? And did you celebrate it alone? Did you celebrate it with the team? Is that what led to the food poisoning? What happened there?
Okay. Yeah, no, honestly, like I was literally having dinner with some friends last night and we were talking about this exact thing. So I
Mhm.
kind of thought about it, I processed it a bit. Um, it feels rewarding in a sense because it's just been so much work to get to this point. So it's really nice for that to happen and they go, wow, this can actually work. This is the first company I've created, and it's a big chance starting a company, especially when you have a career as a
Yeah.
background. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's really, I guess, kind of euphoric in a way. And yeah, it's a really nice experience. But to be honest, like we've just been so busy and so heads down that it hasn't felt like it's kind of I need to pinch myself a little bit that it's
Yeah.
all going. I mean, we're not massive yet, but we're getting there, and so that's been really exciting. I do need to celebrate. A good friend of mine last night said you need to celebrate the wins. He's also a business founder, and he
Yeah.
said like it's so easy to just skip by those little wins that you have along the way, and it's important to celebrate them. So I think maybe this weekend I'll do something.
That's nice. Yeah, that's such an important reminder. But I like that you touched on the fact that this is your first company and it's a big switch when you already have a career and you let it go. Um, do you want to walk our listeners through a little bit of your background? I checked out the LinkedIn profile, and there was a lot of growth marketing, and you worked at like a variety of different companies before making this plunge or making this jump. So a little bit of background. I don't think anyone else can tell it better than you do. So
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've been working in startups for about 10 years, B2B SaaS mostly. So it's a bit of a long story to go through it all, but the short and sweet of it is, I kind of didn't know what I was going to do with my life, like a lot of people, to be honest. I skipped university. I sort of did gap year. Um, I was lucky enough to sort of get invited to this startup in kind of like an SDR role when I was like 21 and I
yeah.
hadn't been to university. I absolutely sucked at that, honestly. I didn't make one sale or book one demo. But instead of them firing me after like 3 months, I was a little bit handy with like technology. And I think someone just left the company that was in marketing. It was like a 30-person startup. And they said, you're kind of cheap right now. Why don't you just try and figure out these things with like HubSpot for us and that kind of stuff? And it was just a kind of coincidence that I kind of fell into it, and I never sort of planned it. And then, 10 years forward, I'm running a team of about 15 people as a head of marketing, and worked at several awesome companies. My kind of MO is I join usually about first 50 employees and leave when it's about 200 employees. So that's kind of what I've done every point. So, going through these sort of like early Series A growth cycles at about 4 or 5 different startups. That's been kind of my career.
That's pretty cool. Fun fact, I also started as an SDR at 21, and I switched into marketing, I think a year and a half into it, because I could not bear talking to voicemail systems or voice answering systems more than human beings, because, I would make 100 calls a day, out of which 90 of them no one picked up. So I would just, be leaving voicemails, and then finally someone would pick up, only to slam the phone on my face and say, not today. So I get it. It's not a easy job to be on the phones and be out there in the trenches.
It's brutal. I found my way with sales now to some degree. I've just gotten better at talking to people and communicating over, since I've been 21. But at the start, it's so brutal. Like cold calling people, picking up the phone. I remember I used to just come into work every day with like intense anxiety. Like, what the
Yeah.
fuck? I need to like do this. Yeah, it's super brutal. It's super brutal. But I learned a lot during that experience, so it was great, and it worked out some way.
Yeah, that's a massive transformation. And I love that you had that ammo that, okay, I would enter like a company which has like 50 people and then move out when it was 200. It's almost like bookends, and you're like, okay, as once it crosses this, what made you decide that okay, this was 50 to 200 is my sweet spot? After 200, was there a shift in the type of work you did or the relationships that you were like, no, I think I enjoyed up until this this stage of growth, and then move on?
It's a really great question, interesting question. I never like planned it. It wasn't like a rule I went into. It's just kind of when I look back, it's kind of what I did. And I guess the main reason around that is like I really like working in scrappy environments where it's kind of like
Yeah.
you just wear multiple hats, you just get things done. There's not a lot of like hierarchy or like approvals or anything like that. And then I think in the contrast, once you get to about 200 people, you start to have like an executive team. There's more like investor eyes in the situation, and you start to get to a point of scale where the dynamic really shifts and it becomes more about optimization and kind of hiring people to scale things and that kind of stuff, which is exciting in its own way, but it's just not what I personally enjoy. And so I usually find myself tapping out at that point. And the last company I worked for, I kind of went about a year into that scale process. So that's like my biggest experience of that. And it was really cool. But, I think what comes with that, especially in like venture-backed startups, is a lot of politics. Honestly, there's a lot of people that come in that are kind of playing the game. And that's just not what I want to do. I just want to work on really cool problems and grow companies, basically.
That makes sense. And did you also, in one of your posts, say that you have an agency background? So was it like you started an agency, ran it successfully, and then from that, Macaw was born? Or like, what was the transition there?
Yeah, I mean, I've told this story quite a few times to different people, but I guess the summarized version is, I was working at this last company, which was kind of, when I left, it was about 20 million ARR. And we were a heavily sort of inbound focused company. And we had a lot of traffic coming to the website, like organic and SEO was really big deal for us. And then sort of this thing called ChatGPT exploded onto the scene. And like basically day one, I played around with it, so did millions of other people across the world. And I think every single marketer, when they first saw ChatGPT, sort of thought, can this write my content? So, I was in a position, at the time we had 4 writers. So you can understand like the resource, the salary of 4 writers. And so there was a huge opportunity there, of course. So we played around with it, and it was kind of cool. It wasn't really a silver bullet or anything like that, but it aided in the process for sure. And we were a pretty like tech focused marketing team. Often marketing teams are a bit more like creative sort of focused. And we were, using a lot of technology, and we had a lot of like scaled approaches to things. So it was kind of familiar ground for us using this kind of technology in a way. And then, we basically just started to make it work. We had this specific project, without going into too much detail, that, over about 4-month period, we produced about 1,000 pages that we added to our website that were heavily sort of supported by AI. And that was just wildly successful. It was by far the most successful thing I've ever done in marketing. And essentially that sort of represented, we were adding about $1 million ARR per month, basically, in growth. And I think about 350, 400K of that was coming from this AI generated content. So it was just enormously successful. And I remember the next board meeting that we had at this company, our major investor was just kind of dumbfounded how we'd done this, essentially, because this was, again, like within 6 months of it coming out, and a lot of people hadn't adopted AI yet.
Yeah.
And so they asked me to speak to their other portfolio companies and like try to explain to them like what the playbook was or kind of how it worked. And I did that, and it was an amazing call. And I realized a couple months later when we checked in, like no one had really adopted this and no one had really executed on it. And it wasn't because they didn't want to or they weren't excited about the opportunity. It was because they just didn't really have the skills or the resources in their marketing teams to execute on this.
Right.
And so, like, to really just catapult things forward, I basically ended up leaving this company out of sort of almost necessity, or not necessity, I guess. I just saw a very clear opportunity to create a product around this because I thought, I know how this works, and we can actually make something here that's useful to people so that these marketing teams can execute. And to sort of start that process, we started validating that, working with some of these companies that I was speaking to. And that just through word of mouth completely exploded. And we were doing about $50,000 a month in revenue from this agency, like within about 6 months. So it was really crazy. And throughout that process, we laid the groundwork for exactly what Macaw is today, which is 100 iterations from what we originally did at the company I was working for, and things have really evolved since then. So that's the kind of very short story.
That is a short story, but that's an amazing story. My favorite part was when the investor was dumbfounded, because it's very rare that happens, right? Because those investors have been in that space for so long. There's very little that could surprise them or almost leave them dumbfounded. So that's fantastic. And the other, like when you were talking about it, I had a question, like given the level of sophistication you used, at that stage, and given how AI is all pervasive now, everybody's using it. Do you think if you were to use the same strategy again today with the same level of sophistication you did, I don't know, 2 years back, would it still bring the same amount of result, or do you think that's been saturated already?
I do, actually. I think what we did was very tailored to our use case. And so it was more effective than something like a generic or a tool that can sort of impact a lot of different people like Macaw would be, because it was kind of tailored for our situation. And then additionally, like I mentioned, we had a team around it. So especially like ChatGPT 3.5, the quality was not up to scratch. It is like published stuff willy-nilly. We were essentially, making that process of creating a page from 2-3 days to 2-3 hours, but there was still a human component there. And so I think it would work if we had those resources again. But things have definitely changed. Yeah, things have definitely changed. It probably wouldn't have worked as well. But as far as I know, I still speak to the team there. It's still performing really, really well, and they haven't changed a lot of things. So yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's great then.
Basically, yeah, we wanted to solve one problem really, really well. And that's still our mission. We think that we have years to go until this problem is really, really thoroughly solved. And that problem, that space is just creating SEO articles, basically SEO content.
That makes sense, and that's a great answer. And I like the focus on SEO. I think that's what makes all the difference, right? Because you're so focused on it, you're like, I have the superpower to ignore everything else that might be the new shiny object and continue to solve this one particular thing really well. And now, changing gears a little to the fun part. I know we started off our conversation with Marty. What made you come up with Marty? What inspired it? And also, what kind of a process did you go through to nail down Marty's personality? That's something I'm very curious about because it's very well executed.
Yeah. So for those who don't know who are listening, and maybe people all know, to be honest, because it's like bigger than our brand is kind of Marty, which is our mascot, Marty the McCo. Um, to be honest, it's a pretty like I guess kind of lame answer, but we didn't really copy anything. There wasn't really. It was kind of us just doing iteration and experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we just kind of land on this idea. I think I was playing around with like some AI tools and I realized like, oh, we can create something really cool here.
Yeah.
And it kind of just came together. So it was really just when we were doing a brand experimentation. I'm a designer as well, so when I was doing sort of brand experimentation, spending some time looking at different styles and different ways that we could stand out. It just kind of all clicked together, and it was like awesome. And I was like, I'm in love with this guy. And so we just ran with it, honestly, and everything's around it. And it's very much like what we have with Marty and kind of the brand right now is very much like a V0.1. It was kind of a landing page to get out. We only launched a few months ago, but
Yeah.
we have really, really big plans for that parrot.
That's awesome. I think no one else, and I think I mentioned this on one of the comments on your post as well. After the Duolingo bird, I think
Right.
like that was a big success story. After that, I see Marty being the next like big success story because of
Totally.
how popular he's gotten. And I like that you're like we were looking for a way to stand out. That leads me to my next question because the content space, the space you're in, is pretty crowded. There's so many tools out there.
I don't
Um,
think there's a more crowded space.
right? It's like a red ocean. Like it is a
100%.
red ocean. So when you were getting started, did that deter you at all? Or did it add validation saying there are so many players and people keep wanting more? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, it all links together really nicely. So, I mean, again, when we started out, we were kind of first movers in terms of like us implementing it, or myself implementing it with our team at the company I
Mm-hmm.
was working with. There was no tools, there was nothing really in this
Yeah.
space, so we kind of invented it.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, not invented it. I'm sure dozens of other teams were executing on this at the same time, but we were definitely first movers on it. And then the actual like initial idea with McCaw and actually creating the product and everything like that was really at a time where there was nothing else in the space. I mean, I'm sure there was a few like wrappers, like really easy wrappers and that kind of stuff. There was one
Yeah.
product which I can mention, which is a competitor of ours, is Byword had come out. They moved really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there were some options. There were some options for sure, but it wasn't really at the time a question of like competition. It was like, hey, let's just create something really good here. I think there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
As we were building the process, as we were building the product, it took the better part of a year really for us from the first line of code to us launching. But during that process, obviously, we were validating with like the agency and all that kind of stuff. So it was sort of a hybrid situation.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely had a lot of moments of like, holy crap, there is a lot of people doing this now.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of questions about, will it be too crowded? Is this going to be really difficult?
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually a really big reason we put so much effort and care into our brand, is because, in this space, there's a lot of people that have created products really quickly and probably not with a lot of care. And I really don't want to like trash anyone sort of creating these products. I think it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
But we really wanted to do something a little bit, elevate things a little bit in terms of how we position things and how we brand ourselves. So that's a really big, that's like definitely,
Mm.
a conscious strategy for sure. And that's leaning on my background in marketing and branding.
Got it. Okay. And when we are talking about the competition, does that keep you up at night? And if it doesn't, is there anything that keeps you up at night about being in this space?
Does it keep me up at night? Not really, to be honest, because there's just 1,000 tools. If it was like one really big competitor that we were kind of looking at and we were like comparing ourselves to them, then maybe a little bit more so. But there's so many tools sort of with their own lane that are kind of succeeding in their own ways. Because in this market, like there's so many different segments of people that want to do SEO, and there's different types of people that work, like different types of products that are kind of tailored for those people in terms of cost, in terms of features, in terms of whatever they need, in terms of also how they're marketed and positioned. So I think that we can find our own little like lane in here. And I mean, if you look at SEO agencies, which basically was the solution to this problem before that, and they obviously still exist and they're valuable.
Yeah.
There's a million of them as well, right?
Yeah.
I'm not too concerned about it. I think that we can do really well even in this crowded market.
Hmm.
For us, it really just comes down to we want to be the very best when it comes to quality, and that's what we focus on a lot, and that's what we put a lot of our energy into. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better, and that basically ends up meaning less time polishing and making changes to get it out the door, basically, and publish it on the website.
That makes sense. And I think that goes back to your tweet where you're like, "Oh, does someone want to copy Macau? Here is like the cheat sheet." And then it's basically a list of things that can't be replicated because it's your experience, your firsthand experience, which is your moat. Like it does not get better than this because it's tried and tested over and over again with multiple different clients. And that's what makes this product so great.
Absolutely, yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, you can copy our UI, you can copy our brand. I wouldn't recommend it, but because you wouldn't stand out. But you really can't copy what we've done behind the scenes. I mean, you can, of course, you can. I mean, there's a lot of smart people. I'm sure, given time, you could, but it's unlikely that people will go to that level of detail. So things might change in a couple of years, but yeah, we're in a pretty good position because of all that work. So it is to some degree a moat.
Yeah, that is great. And I think talking about moat, there's data, experience, distribution. How is it on the distribution front? When I say or relationship front, how much focus is on maintaining those strong relationships with existing clients? How do you manage that while also trying to build a pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. So we still work with some clients. We've sort of a lot of the stuff we were doing isn't really a recurring retainer thing. It's more project based. But we do
Okay.
have some clients that are still on that. We're mostly focused on the product now.
Hmm.
What we did early on is we actually started working with quite a large SEO agency as one of our very first like beta customers about 6 months ago,
Hmm.
and they've started implementing McCall with like 15 of their clients. And they were getting insane success using it, and just were coming back for more every day and sharing, screenshots of charts going crazy and stuff like that. And they were like, "This is insane."
Yeah.
And we just found that we were working really, really well with them. And about a month before we actually launched the product, we officiated sort of a partnership with them, and now they handle our services side. So we basically, I mean, we don't advertise it super like well because it's not really applicable for at least for like the Twitter audience.
Hmm.
But yeah, we absolutely offer like a services side as well. So it's basically we do your whole SEO strategy. We create content with Macaw. So it's kind of a completely handled experience.
Got it. This almost reminds me of like a reseller sort of situation, or not exactly, but you outsource the product to a person who then has multiple clients and they use it. So they don't necessarily know that they're using a particular tool, or in this case, do they know that the your partner, quote unquote, is using Macaw? Do they know that? Do the end customers know that?
They do, yeah, they do. We
Okay.
don't, we don't like when we're sort of explaining it to people. We don't usually talk about that. I have no issue with that. They're an incredibly successful SEO agency.
Got it.
Like we're essentially a team. We communicate all the time on Slack about clients. We work on stuff together. They're testing beta features, so
Yeah.
they're completely integrated into what we do. They're
Yeah.
just technically a different company.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I like that you refer to them as team, which brings me to my next question. As a head of marketing in your previous life, you have led people and you have managed people, correct? And now, too, you are managing and leading people, but it is from a founder perspective. Is there a lot of difference between the two situations, or not really? Doesn't make a difference at all?
The biggest difference is my calendar is usually empty. At least in this company, like a previous company, when you have 14, 15 direct reports and you have
Mhm.
leadership meetings and all this kind of stuff, your calendar is just full and you're spending about 80% of your time communicating and disseminating information. And so I do have meetings, but it's like way, 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 way reduced. It's amazing. I love it. But yeah, I know, like we're not really, I'm not really directly managing anyone right now. We don't have any employees. It's just me and my co-founder, like focused on the product side. And
Mhm.
then, like I said, we're working with this agency, but again, they're a 30-person team that is, quite established already. So they don't, it's more of a collaboration than a management.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And when you were talking about meeting with your clients earlier, how do you make it a point that you have to, have certain number of meetings with, prospects or certain number of meetings with clients to stay connected to the ground, or is it more organic?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit more organic. I don't know if this is regular. Again, this is the first company I've started, but we have a lot of people coming through on our live chat asking questions. We're extremely responsive. My co-founder is in Australia. I'm in Portugal, so we're basically covering 24 hours a day, and we both work on the weekends mostly. So pretty much, I think our average response time, it automatically averages it, is like 4 minutes on our live chat, and in most cases, it's like almost instant. We're getting a lot of feedback already, and we're speaking to some of our bigger customers and trying to understand how they're using it. And
That's great. And since you won't be able to do that with a lot of people or all your clients, let's do it now in a short version, right? If someone were to use Macaw or any content generation tool out there, what are the 5 things or six basic things that you would need to know about SEO?
yeah, so I mean, SEO is a massive, massive topic. And if you speak to someone who's been doing it for 20 years, which there are many people like that,
Hmm.
the nuts and bolts of it's actually very complicated. But for the average business that's starting out and trying to rank, and especially if you're not in an extremely competitive niche, with keywords that are thousands of, or hundreds of thousands or millions of people are searching a month, it's
Hmm.
actually relatively simple to get started. And I would say the four like non-negotiable components, sort of three with a asterisk on the last one.
Yeah.
One is you need to make sure, the easiest one is you need to make sure you have a site that's set up for SEO.
Hmm.
A really easy way to do that is just to look at Google Lighthouse in Chrome, and just see what your SEO score is, your performance score. You want to make sure it's loading, fast enough, all these kinds of things. But that's a really simple one. You can usually set that up.
Hmm.
If you use templates for like Webflow, they're usually going to be great out of the box. The second one is keyword research. It's incredibly important. We have this as well with our product. Right now, we don't have a keyword tool, but we're working on this right now. This is our next like big thing that we're going to be adding. But keyword research, there's a lot of people that sort of think about content as topics that they want to talk about, as
Hmm.
opposed to trying to target what people are actually searching for. So keyword research is a really important one in terms of actually looking for keywords that you can potentially rank for that are actually going to drive interest and traffic, as opposed to just, oh, a customer of mine had this question, so I'm going to write an article about it. And it's like that may luckily coincide to line up with a keyword that has some traffic coming from it,
Yeah.
but you generally want to start with a basis of a keyword. And the really, really quick and dirty rule to keywords when you're starting out is try and find things that are very low competition and as high as possible monthly search volume, essentially. That's the very basic gist of it. And then
Right.
as you grow and as you sort of establish topical authority, you can, there's more things you can do. But for at least the first 3 to 6 months, that's
Yep.
largely what you can focus on. The third one is backlinks. It is a very difficult topic in a way. Like there's a lot of nuance there, so I'll tread really lightly.
Yeah.
Um, 9 times out of 10, you don't need backlinks when you're starting. You really don't. And if people are trying to sell them to you, it's a little shady, to be honest. There are exceptions, so it's not a hard and fast rule.
Hmm.
But generally speaking, you want to have some level of authority before you start going crazy for backlinks. And
Yeah.
also, I mean, this might ruffle a few feathers, but getting backlinks on sites like directories and these kinds of things are not generally going to be very useful for you, to be honest. Even though your domain authority and hrefs and these kinds of tools will say your authority is higher,
Yeah.
that's an overly simplified score that doesn't actually reflect how Google measures authority. It's not to say it couldn't be beneficial or will hurt you. So like, don't make me stop you. but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have, an improved authority. Anyway, the backlinks topic is a big one. The two main ways of getting backlinks is you can either pay for them, which can be very expensive, especially from trusted sources, or the next one is that you can, do guest posting essentially. So you can, post on their site, they'll post on your site, or you can do link insertions and share. So there's different ways to do it. You can do it organically for free effectively if you do outreach, or you can pay for it as well. And then the final one is creating content. So you got to create content. And creating content, obviously that's what Macaw does, but that's really 80-90% of the time that you spend doing SEO is creating content. It's a super time consuming thing. And really when it comes down to content, obviously you want to make sure it's SEO optimized. I've got a little checklist, which I think it's pinned to my Twitter handle of kind of, things you can do like on-page optimization for your content. But effectively you want to create content that's targeting the keywords you're going after. That's effectively it. You can write it from scratch, but a good article might take you a few days, honestly. If you put a lot of detail in it, it's a couple of thousand words. You can use ChatGPT or Claude or something like that, and that works really well as well. But you're again you might cut that time down from 1 or 2 days to 3 or 4 hours, but it's still going to be a time-consuming process getting that to a point you want. Or you can use a tool like Macaw, and you can cut that process down to 5 or 10 minutes. So that's kind of the situation. So that's the 4, I guess, pillars, the non-negotiables. And I guess one thing to really mention on that is that if you screw one of those things up or they're not done correctly, then your entire SEO will fail. So if you have amazing backlinks and great content, but your site is super slow, you can succeed, but you're really hurting yourself. So it's really important to get all 4 of those things right at the same time.
That makes sense. No pressure there at all, right? But that's awesome. No, thank you for that rundown. And so when you were talking about the keywords, it's basically low keyword difficulty and high volume. That's the basis of the keywords point, correct?
Absolutely, especially when you're starting out, because they're going to be the things that are easiest for you to rank for. Google, the way Google ranks things is based on relevancy and authority. And when you're starting out, you don't have really any authority, and so if you're going for lower competition, it's much easier to rank for them, and that allows you to build some authority in this space and actually rank and sort of effectively get seen in Google's eyes as like a trusted source on a topic. And then it makes it a lot easier for you to go up to these higher competition keywords in the future. And you can start to add, backlinks into the mix as well and improve things. But generally speaking, my advice for your first 1 to 3 months is really just focus on, low difficulty, as high volume as possible keywords.
Yeah. And also I think relevancy is equally important. You can't try to rank for something that's not related to the website you're building on. That comes across as spammy, and I'm guessing Google also punishes you for doing that, right?
100%, yeah. If your site is relevant, if Google, in Google's eyes, I could get extremely technical about it, but effectively in Google's eyes, if it sees you as an authority on a topic, like a topic space, let's say, home improvements or something like that. If you're writing content about that, you're gonna rank a lot better, and if your content is related to that, you're gonna rank a lot better for other topics related to home improvements. So it uses the authority of the topic within your site as well to rank things.
That makes sense. And this is a little bit of a left field question, but whenever we talk about SEO, because Google is the biggest search engine, we automatically default to thinking about how we can optimize for Google's algorithm. But what about Bing? I know Bing is very little compared to Google, but it's still big and it is popular among certain sections. For example, one of the clients that I worked with when I was freelancing was for Medicare in the US, which is like 50 to 60-year-old folks. And they used Bing because that was default on their phone, right? And they never bothered to download Google. Is it different for Bing? Is that even a topic among the SEO community or not?
Certainly a topic. It is definitely a topic that comes up a lot. Bing 100% has their own unique algorithm for ranking things. And there's differences between Google and Bing. But for the average Joe, if you're not, if you don't have a whole team around you, or if you're not spending $50,000 a month on SEO, you probably have bigger things to focus on than optimizing your content for Bing, to be honest, because 9 times out of 10, or really 99 times out of 100, if you're ranking on Google, you're going to be ranking on Bing as well, generally speaking. It's
Exactly.
really only when you're getting down to, if you're a Canva or something like that, where, they have 100 people in their growth team and 8 SEOs, and they're optimizing and competing on all these different topics. Yeah, of course, you're going to be considering Bing, and you're going to be thinking about how can we really optimize there, and also other search engines as well. But for, Series A and below, and sort of like solo founders and stuff like that, you just really want to focus on Google. That's really to make things simple.
That makes sense. And how do LLMs change the game? Because I was reading this article about Google versus, LLMs now, ChatGPT, where instead of me searching on Google, I could just go on ChatGPT and ask, can you give me like top 10 tools for, I don't know, give me an example, Medicare companies, and it'll give me 10, right? How does that work? How does ChatGPT pick up on certain tools as suggestions versus others? Is that still piggybacking off of Google's SEO, or do they have a certain different mechanism that marketers or even founders need to be worried about?
Yeah, I believe there's like even an acronym for this, which is I think it's like GEO, which is like generative search optimization, or something, GSO or something. I don't know. But
Okay.
yeah, there is like methodologies. There is people trying to focus on this problem to try and get shown up in like essentially the training data that's relevant for search queries in LLMs. There is some interesting stuff, I'm sure, happening around there. I'm not as familiar with it, to be honest with you. But to answer your question about how it does it, if it's not search, like something like Perplexity actually searches the internet and has up to date active information, and so do other LLMs. But if you use something like ChatGPT, 4.0 right now, or 4.0, it's just going to be basically recommending these tools based on the context it has from its training data. And so that could be incorrect. It could be really correct. It's
Yeah.
not really up to date necessarily or anything like that. So, I mean, I think more and more people, especially with the rise of Perplexity, which is, like an LLM built for basically searching for things. I think there's some really interesting stuff happening there, and I think the space will definitely change. But I think for 95% of people, they're still just going to open up a new tab of Google, and they're going to search what they need. I think for the vast majority of use cases, Google is still the easiest way to find what you're looking for.
Got it.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's still amazing.
So you don't see the trend changing in the near future where, people are completely overhauling and like choosing an LLM for a first search for the majority of the population.
I think for the majority, no. I think there will be some like early adopters that just love it, and it's like exactly how they think. A friend stayed with me a couple of weeks ago, and he was using constantly you have a conversation with someone, and you go, "Hang on, what year did that happen?" And some people
Yeah.
will Google it, and this guy had ChatGPT on his phone, and he was just speaking, dictating to ChatGPT, and I was like, "Wow, that's really neat." And so I think there will be certain users or like certain types of people that will just really like to have that kind of response. They want the detail, they sort of trust it.
Hmm.
um, I can definitely see it becoming big, but to answer your question, no, I don't. I don't think it will become like the majority thing anytime
Okay.
soon. At least not in the like near term horizon.
Got it. So marketers can rest easy. They don't have to learn a whole other thing just yet.
Just yet, yeah.
Just
Maybe give
yet.
it a few years, and we'll have a conversation again. It'll be very
Yeah.
different. So
Yeah.
let's see.
That makes sense. Well, I think those were all the questions I had for you today. And I loved talking to you. I love that we were able to get into detail about different topics and answer some of the tough questions. That's what makes conversations interesting, not just for the listeners, but even for us. So this was wonderful. Thank you so much. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to link your profile, Macaw, and also the pinned tweet about the SEO checklist, all of that in the description below for our listeners. And I will also be sharing this on all our social media channels so people can come watch and listen to your amazing story so far. And I cannot wait to see what you do with Marty and Macaw. It's a very exciting journey, and I'm so happy to be here and witnessing it.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. Honored, and it was an amazing conversation. I'm really had a great time. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great day. And in the language of the my first million pod, I'll just say that's the pod.